بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم تنزيله بعد أن أقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فلعلك باخع نفسك على آثارهم إن لم يؤمنوا بهذا الحديث أسفا صدق الله العظيم. All praises are due to Allah, and may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon His Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The Prophet ﷺ was described in the Quran, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, that you are at the highest level, O Prophet, of character. That if character was like a great mountain, then you, O Prophet, would be sitting at the top of that great mountain. That your character would elevate you to the top of that mountain, which is the mountain of character. Allah uses the word ala, which means upon or over, on top of. And that is what personifies for us what that mountain could be. And so when we think of the Prophet ﷺ's character, what do we think about? Many of us might think about as-sadiq al-amin, the truthful, the trustworthy. And he was that, of course. And he had so many parts of his character, which is where we should go to, as he is our role model. So we should go to him to learn from him about all those different qualities that he has. One of the qualities which I would like to discuss today is the quality of empathy. And it is something that in our time is more appreciated than it has been before. So I wanted to talk about the Prophet Muhammad's empathy. And empathy is different from sympathy. Sympathy is someone is in pain, someone has a strong feeling, and you try to connect with them on that feeling. But empathy is where you can step into their shoes and you can feel as they feel. And so it's stronger than just sympathy. If you lost your loved one, I'm sorry, that's sympathy. Empathy is where you're right in there, in that emotion with them. And many a time, we might come from backgrounds where being emotional is actually frowned upon, especially for men. And so it's important for us to understand how the Prophet ﷺ was, because he was the manliest of men. And he was the example. And so how did he respond to people who were coming to him for comfort, people who were coming to him at times of grief, people who were coming to him in such situations? The Prophet ﷺ, he suffered. The Quran talks about his own suffering when the Muslims were discriminated against. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Azizun alayhi ma anittum. That every time you all, O believers, suffer at the hands of the Quraysh or whoever, Azizun alayhi, it's something that is so hard on him, it is so burdensome on him. Bil mu'minina ra'ufur rahim. He is someone who really cares for the believers. He is someone who is really merciful towards the believers, and any suffering that they go through as a result of their belief is so hard on him. It's so burdensome on him. Even those who don't believe, even those who don't believe, the Quran says, فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ. We read on Surah Al-Kahf. Every Friday we read. فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ. How is this translated? How is this translated? Have you read the translation of فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ? What does it say? You're about to kill yourself. You are killing yourself. عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ, because of their deeds. إِن لَّمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَسَفًا, if they don't believe in this word. Asafa, out of sheer grief, out of regret and grief over their actions, over their future suffering because of their rejection. And actually their aggression, rather. Not just their rejection, but also their aggression. And you are killing yourself in grief over that. The word bakha'a means in Arabic to till the land and to till and to farm the land until nothing is left. And how does that apply here? That the Prophet, his heart is so in grief that it's as if there's no emotion left, that all the emotion has been taken out. That's how much in grief he is over the situation. And this goes for the people who are attacking him and are aggressors. And so what about those who are his companions, his family, his friends? And so let's look at the instances in the life of the Prophet ﷺ when he showed such great times of empathy. And that was not with his companions and his friends as much as it was with actually the people who were openly, publicly, his enemies. His enemies. So the greatest of those enemies in Mecca, in the time of Mecca, was Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl was originally known as father of wisdom, Abu al-Hakam. But they started calling him Abu Jahl because, which means father of ignorance. They started calling him that because of the kinds of torture that he would put the Muslims under. And many of us might have heard those stories of Abu Jahl, that the Muslims called him the Fir'aun of his time, the Pharaoh of his time, and that he fought the Muslims at Badr, and he was a main aggressor against the Muslims in that time. And then after Abu Jahl passed away, his son Ikrimah comes to Mecca, to the Prophet ﷺ. And word is that he is coming to the Prophet to accept Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ, what could he have done? And this was a time where tribalism was everything, that you were your father, and if you had no father, you were an orphan. If you had a mother but no father, you were an orphan. That's how important who your father is. And Ikramah, he is the son of the greatest enemy of Islam. And when they just hear the name Ikramah, they remember Abu Jahl. And when they remember Abu Jahl, they think of all the things that Abu Jahl put them through. The people that they lost because of Abu Jahl. All those emotions are coming back when they hear that Ikramah, the son of Abu Jahl, is coming to Mecca. And what does the Prophet do? He is not someone who keeps thinking about the past. A lot of us, we are always in the past, thinking about everything that's happened before. But the Prophet ﷺ is someone who is actively in the present. And he says to the companions, he says, don't call his father Abu Jahl. When Ikrimah comes, don't call his father Abu Jahl. It doesn't matter how bad Abu Jahl was. It doesn't matter what he did. Don't call his father Abu Jahl, because it will hurt Ikrimah. This is how much the Prophet ﷺ cared about the feelings of the son of his enemy. They didn't actually know what Ikrimah was coming for. That was the word on the street. It seems to be this is probably the reason why he's coming. And the Prophet ﷺ, he anticipated the emotions that Ikrimah was probably feeling. That Ikrimah was probably embarrassed by the actions of his father and his own actions. And he's probably thinking, how will I ever seek forgiveness enough from the Prophet? But the Prophet ﷺ is anticipating that in advance. He's not waiting for Ikrimah to come to feel him out. What is his face like? Is he truly regretful? Is he truly remorseful? And once I feel him out and I make sure that he's on my side, then I'll treat him with some respect. But the Prophet ﷺ anticipates it, and he acts and he tells the companions not to say Abu Jahl. Another example is the greatest aggressor against the Prophet ﷺ in the time of Medina was who? The one causing discord and chaos and disunity was Abdullah ibn Ubay, the chief of the hypocrites. He was the one spreading all kinds of rumors about the Prophet's wife Aisha, about the different tribes and how they shouldn't unite, and how he was bringing up all their past grievances and causing problems. So much so that when he died, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed verses in the Quran exposing his hypocrisy even before his death. And then the son of Abdullah shows up. And the son of Abdullah is upset. And he's crying that his father passed away. And he's embarrassed because he knows what his father did. And he knows the role that his father played in Medina and the kind of trouble that he caused. So he has conflicting emotions that his father was his father, but he's also embarrassed because of the actions of his father, especially at the end of his life. And what does the Prophet ﷺ do? Does the Prophet ﷺ say, Allah has revealed this verse, don't ever think about your father again? Does he say, why are you crying over a hypocrite? Not just any hypocrite, but the chief of the hypocrites. What did the Prophet ﷺ say? He did not say a word. He took off his own shirt and he gave it to Ikrimah. And that was him honoring Ikrimah. Not Ikrimah, the son of Abdullah. Honoring him and telling him that it's okay that you feel what you feel at the loss of your father. Validating his emotion. And that is something which a lot of us have to work on. When someone comes to us and they are sad, they are grieving, how do we respond? How do we respond? It's important for us to think about that. And this is how the Prophet ﷺ responded to the family of his enemies. That in those times, family was, like father, like son. But the Prophet ﷺ allowed the son of Abdullah to feel the way that he was feeling and validated his emotion and validated his feelings. And so that's an important thing for us to learn as Muslims, to learn about how the Prophet ﷺ, how he validated others' emotions and allowed them to be emotional. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He helps us to learn from that and helps us to be more empathetic. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. I remember when my grandfather passed away. And when he passed away, I took it, I went for the ghusl. We did the ghusl, we washed the body. We went to the graveyard, and I was perfectly fine. I was not showing anything in terms of emotion. But as soon as they lowered him into the grave, and then we made the dua, and they asked me to lead the dua, then I just broke down, and I was crying. And someone came to me and said, don't cry. Someone said, don't cry. Hold it in, don't cry. And that's such an interesting response. Is that what the Prophet ﷺ would have done? There's this misconception that when we lose someone, we should not cry. And this is something that existed even during the companions' time. And it stemmed from the fact that the Prophet ﷺ stopped a certain practice. And that practice was that when someone would die in pre-Islamic times, the people would compete to cause a huge commotion about the death of their loved one. So they would rip their clothes, and they would drum the drums, and they would wail, and they would scream. And it was like a competition who could cause more of a spectacle, because that shows how much you love that person. And it was an exaggeration, and it was extreme. And so the Prophet ﷺ put a stop to that. And what many interpreted that, even during his time, was that, oh, you should not cry when someone dies. So much so that Umar, the great Umar, when he was dying, he was stabbed, and he was dying. And Suhaib, one of his friends, said, oh, my friend, my brother, and Suhaib is crying, and Umar is saying, don't cry, you should not cry. And Umar is the one who is on his deathbed. And Umar was a very rough personality. He was a tough person. He was a very black and white person. Radiyallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with him. He was a specific kind of personality. He said, don't cry, Suhaib. And he said, the Prophet forbade this. He gave him a command. The Prophet forbade you from crying. And his son Abdullah is there. And the Prophet's cousin Abdullah ibn Abbas is there. And so in a hadith in Bukhari, Abdullah ibn Abbas goes to Aisha. And Aisha is the one who has narrated so many ahadith. She's in the top 3 of most narrated hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. And she knew all the nuances. She knew about the Prophet ﷺ's life at home. And when Abdullah told her that Umar said this, he was asking her. He was telling her, but he was also asking her, is that true? And what did Aisha say? She said, Rahimahullah. He said, may Allah have mercy on Umar, he has passed. May Allah have mercy on him. But the Prophet ﷺ never said this. He never said you shouldn't cry like this. And he never said that crying harms the deceased in this way. And then she recited the verse, وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى, that no soul is burdened by the burden of another soul. That your crying cannot harm someone else. وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ أُخْرَى. And this was Aisha radiallahu anha. And that is why we find in the time of the Prophet ﷺ that he is holding a child who is dying and he is crying. And the question was asked that, oh, Rasulullah, do you cry? And he said, Allah is merciful and he loves mercy. And when the Prophet ﷺ's son Ibrahim passed away, then he cried. And someone said, do you cry, O Prophet? Do you reject what Allah has done? That Allah has taken your son? And the Prophet ﷺ explained, إِنَّ الْعَيْنَ لَتَدْمَعُ, that the eyes, they tear. That this is emotion, this is normal. There's not something you have to control or something you have to repress. There's extremes, which the Prophet forbade. But to show a regular, normal emotion is okay. And that's something which the Prophet ﷺ showed in his own lifetime. And he validated those. Imagine when Abdullah, the son of Abdullah ibn Ubay, came. He's like, my father passed away. The Prophet ﷺ, as a human being, probably thought of his own father. That he never met his father. That his father passed away before he was born. And so he was able to step in the shoes of the son of the chief hypocrite and act accordingly. He was able to empathize. So this is something that's very important for us to understand. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He helps us to increase in our empathy and to work on it, even if we're really bad at it. Even if we're really bad, we have to work on it. The Umar himself, he said, إِنَّمَا الْحِلْمُ بِالتَّحَلُّمِ, that forbearance and mercy and patience, it comes through practice. It doesn't happen at the first time. And that's so important when our kids come to us with their feelings. They come to us with how they're feeling, what happened at school, what's happening between them and their friends, what's happening between them and their teachers. It's important for us to be emotionally available. It's important for us to validate their emotions. And that is how we can build a connection with our kids. We complain, our kids are going upstairs in their room, they shut the door, they don't talk to us. And that's a normal teenage thing. At the same time, what have we done to emotionally connect? And when the child does come to us with how they're feeling, do we say, do we do that? Or do we listen? Do we ask good questions? Even if we're nervous, even if we're anxious, do we try to talk to them and connect to them, because that is what they need. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He helps us to do that. Before I conclude, I wanted to also talk about, we are in Black History Month. And I don't want to select only Black History Month for this. We should also remember this in other times. But especially today, I wanted to talk about how important it is that we empathize and that we step into the shoes of our Black brothers and sisters and everything that they have gone through in this country, especially what has happened in this country and the history of Black people in this country. It's important for us to step into their shoes and realize what they have gone through. For us, we have taken advantage of so many different opportunities that come before us, that we're able to work in the big tech companies and so on. But for generations, Black people in this country, every opportunity was stolen from them. And actually it was put into law that Black people can only live in these districts, or they should not be able to obtain mortgages, they should not be able to obtain loans to buy homes, and so on. So many things, thing after thing, which was put into law for every opportunity to be taken from them. And they fought back. And because of the civil rights movement, and I've said this before, we're only here because of that civil rights movement. But we should not only think about Black people as, oh, they helped us come here, but even more than that, we should empathize with them as our brothers and sisters and realize that our future is connected to their future, and our past is connected to their past. So it's important for us as Muslims to talk about this in our families, to have a family movie night and watch something that is related to Black history. For example, one of the things on my list is Hidden Figures. It's a movie about 3 NASA scientists who were Black women and how that all played out in the 1950s and 60s, as one example. To have a family movie night, watch something that is related to Black history. Educate yourself and don't depend on other people telling you. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He helps us to increase in empathy. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He helps us to follow the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has mercy and forgives those that have passed away. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He cures those that are sick. May Allah give them shifa'an ajilan kamilan, quick, complete shifa. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that those are in need, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fulfill their needs. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He helps us to have mercy for each other, not only for our family, but for our friends and all of those around us, and for our community, and for everyone that comes across us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He helps us to be like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in our interactions with others. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that when our time comes and we leave this earth, that our last words are La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants us His shade on the day when there is no shade but His. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that when our time comes on this earth, that we enter the highest levels of paradise. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم ولذكر الله تعالى أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون وأقم
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله